Ladies and gentlemen, we have a big update regarding the current talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. The U.S. trying to find a solution. They offered their plan yesterday. I went over it. Some people say Russia's not going to accept it. Some people say Ukraine is not going to accept it. Well, when you talk about a peace deal, there's going to have to be a little bit of give on both sides, and both sides are going to be left a little bit angry. A few things that are interesting that I've heard recently. There is some discontent within Russia in regards to Putin and his lack of aggressiveness when it comes to this war, which, when you think about it, it is understandable, considering at the start of this, everyone thought there would be an immediate huge land grab by the Russians in terms of making it possibly all the way to Kyiv, maybe splitting Ukraine in half. None of that's really happened, and now they're left with around 19% of the total land area of Ukraine currently occupied. And under Trump's New Deal, they will get 4 oblasts, but they potentially will lose land that they currently have under government administration beyond those territories. Maybe they only get 17 or 16% of Ukraine, which some Russians would say is a big loss. If you're Putin, you can definitely, because this is a peace deal, swing this as a propagandized win when you're talking about there being less of a Western presence in Ukraine. Whether or not they'll have elections in terms of Zelensky and what's going to be happening there, that will probably happen after the peace deal is reached. But you can see we've got a few different things here. By the way, guys, make sure you like the video down below and subscribe for more. But we've got breaking. Trump says he believes he has reached a deal with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, you get these things from X. They get reported constantly. Some of them are true, some of them aren't. I do think there is a huge push and a lot of pressure being exercised right now by the Trump administration. We saw what Trump said, what Vance said, and what Rubio said in terms of this is the last hope. And I really don't think they're being honest. I think they realize that they get into the negotiations. Trump changes the tune when it comes to the war. He stops the funding to Ukraine. It starts again because Ukraine signs a ceasefire, and there's talk of a minerals deal to where we're going to be repaid for the amount of money we've given them. But they get into this. They start the negotiations. There was some momentum to a ceasefire. Ukraine agreed to it. Russia agreed to a partial ceasefire on certain infrastructure areas. They said that Ukraine broke it. And it's been this blame game, and nothing is happening. And we just saw, and Trump not happy with Vladimir Putin striking Kyiv. Trump saying it's bad timing, not necessary, stop, 5,000 soldiers a week are dying, let's get a peace deal done. That's Donald Trump speaking to Putin directly via Truth Social about Putin's strikes in Kyiv, which just recently happened within the past, I want to say the past 12 hours. So this is all big stuff. There's a little bit of escalation. This could be jousting to be in the best, most powerful position to have more leverage when you are discussing peace and when you're talking about doing a deal. And by the way, that's another interesting thing to think about when it comes to Zelensky and what he said about Crimea, because Crimea was annexed in 2014. Ukraine is not getting Crimea back, but Zelensky has this pedestal position in terms of we need Crimea back no matter what. He has to know they're not getting it back, and I wonder if that's just him posturing the idea of wanting Crimea back, so when there are negotiations he can say, well, we're conceding Crimea, so if we concede Crimea you have to give us something else, when in reality they've already lost Crimea. It was annexed and it's going to be recognized by the United States as Russian territory. You're not going to be able to get Crimea back unless they originally thought sanctions would work. All right, that doesn't work. You would have to threaten Russia with a significant military strike from NATO or like a nuclear bomb, or you would have to send troops in to help Ukraine fight the Russians. And so basically what I'm saying is if you get Crimea back, it's military escalation. That's how you do it. Whether it be verbal through threatening to nuke Russia, which you're just not going to do. And listen, these liberals are so angry that Ukraine is giving up territory. Well, why wasn't Biden more aggressive? It's the same position that Trump has. Trump is just trying to reach a peace deal, but they're still funding Ukraine. It's like, it's just crazy to me how these people are like, well, How dare you do a peace deal with the Ukrainians losing the 4 oblasts and losing Crimea? I mean, how else are you going to do a deal? Russia's not going to agree to anything less. The Russian citizens aren't even happy about that. They want more territory based on how much they've sacrificed and the resources and military personnel that they've lost. So what are we left here with in terms of negotiations? Both sides are probably going to be a bit angry. I'm guessing there's going to be the compromise between the Russian aspect of military agreements in terms of Ukraine not joining NATO. For how long, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what is it going to be indefinitely? Is it going to be 20 years? They can't join NATO. I mean, realistically, they just shouldn't join NATO. Because if they join NATO, you're asking for trouble, whether there's a stipulation, and there will be a stipulation that says they can't join NATO. I don't know for how long. Again, I don't know if it's indefinitely, whatever. That'll be negotiated in the peace deal. But then for the Ukrainians, they're going to say, well, we want protection in some way. So we know they have already applied to join the EU. They got elevated to candidate status in 2023. They're still going to be able to do that. Now, maybe Russia is opposed to that. And then that's where you have issues in terms of these peace negotiations. There's also the idea to where Russia wants Ukraine to demilitarize, which was something that came up in the 2022 negotiations. I believe that was the Istanbul negotiations that happened just months after the war started. And that was Boris Johnson telling Zelensky, no, keep this going. And here's another thing that's important to take into account. You have Zelensky, right? And people, they want to blame him. They say he's this warmonger. He doesn't want to end the war. If you look at Russia and Ukraine, Ukraine cannot fundamentally win the war. Their only winning would be Russia going back across their border. That would be a win for Ukraine. And that would be from an exhaustion of Russian resources along with Western pressure with heavy sanctions that cripple the Russian economy. That was the original plan. That's why Boris Johnson said, wait, hold out. We're sending more support. We have sanctions on them. They're going to work. It hasn't worked. All right, it's been too long. They're losing too many troops. They're having to abduct kids or 17, 18-year-olds to go fight on the front line because they've got no one. And this is just what war is. This is why we're trying to end this situation. But this isn't this idea that it's Zelensky trying to continue this war. If Zelensky continues the war, it's from him being emboldened, just like he was in 2022, by the European NATO countries. That's what it is. The UK, France, Germany, those countries coming together and saying, we're going to continue to support you. But what is the strategy if they do that? I mean, because they said originally it was going to be the sanctions and to wait for the sanctions to have effect on Russia, and it would cripple their economy to the point to where you see the United States, the amount of military aid that we sent Ukraine, historic, crazy amounts. That's why Trump's trying to do this minerals deal. Now, there's a lot of haziness when it comes to that, even in terms of the extraction zones, the process, what's going to be extracted. Is it rare earths? Where are they going to be refined? Right now, the rare earths probably get sent to China. I mean, they refine 90% of the rare earths. That's a problem, and I've discussed it multiple times. But the point is, when it comes to this, if Zelensky doesn't agree to a deal, I think it's from emboldenedness of the Western EU powers. That would be my guess. Because what position is Zelensky in to continue this war? I mean, sure, you're still getting money from the West, but the amount of personnel you have is depleted to the point to where, at what point does Russia really start to be more aggressive in terms of westward movement? Because we know they're not fully invested into this war. It's not their full force. So you have to wonder. And so that's my thing. It's like, well, Zelensky just wants to keep this war going. And I know Zelensky's the figurehead, so you can blame him. But Zelensky should be looking for any off-ramp, whether it's from Trump, whether it's from the EU, in terms of, well, yes, we will negotiate peace. What we're asking for is we need some type of security assurances. And in this peace deal, there's going to be assurances from the EU. And if you're Zelensky, you do a minerals deal with the United States for repayment. They're trying to argue, oh, it's a grant, not a loan. I mean, come on, guys. It's $190 billion. Trump wants it back. And to be honest, a lot of the Ukrainians probably would be fine in terms of tying the United States to the region. And it might help them in terms of extraction methods as well, considering so much of that is just untapped within Ukraine. And that's why people would say, well, do they even have these rare earth deposits? We'll have to see. But you've also got the nuclear power plant that would be like right on the new border. If this peace deal goes through, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant would be controlled by the United States in a neutrality thing that would be right on the new border of Russia, Ukraine, if I understand it correctly. And it would be an energy deal with the Russians and more U.S. cooperation with Russia in terms of the energy sector. So you've got that to take into account. So you've got this nuclear power plant that could be controlled by the United States in between the new border of Russia and Ukraine. And where's the DMZ in all of this? I don't think there's going to be one. That, from what I saw, at least from Trump's deal, and maybe the EU steps in and they say we want a DMZ to make sure everything is calm and there's not a reinvasion. Maybe that's what happens. I don't know where the EU is in terms of these talks, but I know they've definitely sent soldiers. They've been more aggressive than the United States, way more aggressive than Trump in terms of, since Trump came in, defending Ukraine. Now, I always said that was posturing to put Ukraine in a more advantageous peace negotiation situation with more leverage to say, we don't have to end this war. We have NATO. The idea for NATO would be Ukraine goes into negotiations basically being able to threaten Russia and say, NATO backs me to the point to where if we run out of soldiers, they're going to fight for us, because then you get a better peace deal. But I mean, that could be seen as escalation as well. But I mean, that's what they would want. That's how all in they would want NATO to be in terms of this, to be able to get a better peace deal from Russia. And listen, again, there's talks out of Moscow and people saying, well, they're not too happy with the Kremlin. They haven't been aggressive on this war, and they're demanding more land. There are government officials within Moscow that want more land. They think this is not good enough for the amount of resources they have exhausted. And that's another thing to understand. The Russians may not be happy with this. They're going to counter with something, potentially more land. They're going to counter with saying Ukraine needs to be demilitarized, possibly not joining the EU. These are all things that we're going to have to see if it works. I mean, at a certain point, I think Trump was like, this is not going anywhere, and we need to try and kickstart it. So I'm going to lay an ultimatum down, and it's going to be public, and there's a 7-point plan, and this is what we want, and you can counteroffer me Ukraine, you can counteroffer me Russia, but we need serious dialogue right now, or I'm done. That's what Trump said. So, and look, you've got this. Trump says he believes he's reached a deal with Russia. I honestly don't think that's true. I don't know when he said that, but Trump does say things sometimes, and now you've got Putin striking Kyiv. We'll see what happens in terms of this. There is this renewed vigor to come to a deal, though, because it was a mess. There was a partial ceasefire that had been broken by both sides. They blamed each other. Zelensky was trying to buy Patriot missile packages from the United States for $15 billion, and Trump said no. That came out on 60 Minutes. Even before then, Zelensky was talking about it. It was just all this quagmire, and so now you've got at least some pressure that Trump is putting on both sides to end this conflict. They came into these negotiations, there was some progress, and then it came to a grinding halt, and now Trump is really trying, and it's Rubio saying this is the last chance. It's Vance saying it's the last chance. It's Trump saying it's the last chance to find, and they're over embellishing, but they're because they're trying to force action by both sides in terms of peace. So we'll see what happens. All sides are talking. They're in Paris. Rubio's not there. He left for whatever reason. But there are people from the United States and members from the EU, I'm sure, Ukraine, Russia. They're talking about peace and trying to find the framework. It's not easy. It's not easy to satisfy both of these sides, especially Russia. I mean, Ukraine, I don't see where... I understand the perspective of we need protection. That's what the Ukrainians are saying. But do they really have a ton of leverage outside of threatening Russia with NATO? That's really all they can say. Well, NATO's going to help us. Well, I mean, at what point do you run out of men? They're running out of men. That's why we see these videos of security cams of them having to take younger 17, 18-year-old boys and men, and it's young men. It's very sad. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.